Welcome to the Experience Shift, where we share insights for healthcare transformation.
I'm Brian Wynn, Senior Vice President of Growth at NRC Health.
And I'm Jennifer Barron, Chief Experience Officer.
Together, Jennifer and I will explore how the experiences of patients, caregivers, and consumers are changing the rules of healthcare.
We'll talk with leading executives, innovators, and thinkers who are challenging assumptions, turning data into action, and reimagining what healthcare can be.
So whether you are in the C-suite, leading a clinical team, or driving innovation, you'll find real stories here and strategies to help you lead change.
Let's shift experience, starting now.
Welcome to the Experience Shift. Today's guest, Ken Hughes, is an internationally acclaimed author, consumer behaviorist, and is often referred to as the king of CX. Ken is known for his work on the blue dot consumer, how modern consumers think, feel, and expect brands to connect with them. He helps organizations translate insight into meaningful human-centric strategies. Now today, in our conversation, we are going to discuss how healthcare organizations can reimagine consumer experience to build loyalty in a rapidly changing landscape. Welcome, Ken.
Let's do it.
Terrific. Well, I should say, first of all, welcome back. We have a new podcast name, but you joined us in 2022 to talk about rapidly changing landscape in healthcare and disruptive forces that applied pressure there. It's been now 3 years. What do you think has changed in that 3 years?
I think the need to understand when people buy anything from you, when they visit any hospital or service, they invite you into their lives. That's for me. I've become fascinated by relationship. In a deepening commodity world where AI really levels the playing field with everybody, everyone's got good product and service now, everyone's got good data. Even small mom and pop businesses can use AI now to really revolutionize how they contact their customer. There's a commoditization of service, of customer experience even. And so the game has become really about deepening relationships, depth and scale. So AI gives you scale. And let's face it, healthcare has enormous scale. But do we have the depth of connection? And I've stopped using the word, since I last met you 3 years ago, I've stopped using the word customer even. Because a lot of the work in customer experience in healthcare is about getting away from the word patient. You know, because the word patient comes from the Latin to bear suffering, which really isn't a great position to be taking. So getting clinical people to even talk about customer is a big leap. But I'm even pushing them further now to start using guest in the hospitality industry, you know. We need to start looking at our institutions and our hospitals as a place where we have guests. And yes, they may be ill, they may be facing certain things, but they are our guests and we need to treat them as guests, not being the process clinically centered places that hospitals often become.
Can we know that to be true, to think about the hospitality version of being a guest versus being a patient? But in the healthcare setting, so many organizations are hesitant to think about patients as consumers or patients as guests and actually focus on sometimes myopic strategies or even singular metrics to define an experience. Why do you think that hesitancy occurs?
I don't know. I mean, maybe clinically it's because we're taught at some point to distance ourselves from the patient for emotional reasons. As a clinical doctor or nurse, maybe it's difficult when you bring your work home with you every night, and maybe it is easier just to see them as a plastic bracelet with a number on them. Maybe that's a coping mechanism. But in the modern economy where customers expect a lot more of every brand they invite into their lives, and I like that expression too, they invite us into their lives. And so like if you're invited to a party, you take your shoes off at the door maybe, you know. If someone invites you into their home, you don't go in and you trash it. And so I think we need to be a bit more respectful of that invitation. If they've chosen us to be a life partner, and literally in any industry I talk about, you know, customer lifetime value and partnership. In healthcare, where it literally is life or death sometimes, it is an invitation we need to respect. And if they've chosen us to be there for them, and they've chosen us to have them on our shoulders, then we need to up the level of respect on that. And I know that the labour force is overworked and tired, and that's a real issue. You know, it's an issue of employee empowerment, really, because everybody got into healthcare for a reason. They didn't get in there to be overworked and underpaid and stressed. They got in because in their heart, in their soul, they believe in what they're doing. And it attracts a certain type of person. But that gets kind of worn down, I feel, after a while. And so it's very difficult at an executive level then to be talking about guest experience and all these things that we want the workforce to do when on the other side, that labour force is exhausted. And that's a real issue in our industry. And until we address that, it's just going to be a PowerPoint slide. It's going to be a writing on the wall of a boardroom. We're all about the patient experience, are we though? Because unless we invest in the employee experience up front, and unless we really show them from the very top, from the leadership, that they are the center of everything, and from there we deliver a truly magnificent guest experience, it doesn't happen. You know, I remember hearing a story. It was actually at a TGI event, A nurse came up to me afterwards and she was talking about during COVID how difficult it was. They were all spending additional time with patients because they had no visitors, and they were already busy, but they had to again spend maybe another 5 minutes with every patient on top of that just to be their visitor as well as their clinician. And she was talking to this old elderly gentleman in his 80s, nervous about surgery the next day, and he had mentioned that he was an angler. He had always loved fishing all his life, and the next day when she came back in on shift, she brought him a little fishing magazine. Just dropped it on his bed, winked at him and said, that's for today. And all his patient experience survey afterwards, there was none of the usual stuff about the quality of the food and whatever. It was every single question he answered about her. She was his Florence Nightingale. She was, and it meant so much to his family. And it was just a magazine, but it wasn't a magazine. It was being seen, being heard, being valued, being treated like a human, as opposed to a piece in a machine. And so that takes energy and it takes time. So we want every one of our employees to be that nurse, don't we? At every time, every moment of every day. But that's exhausting because that nurse also has 101 things to do. Yeah. And a lot of it bureaucratic and admin, which is where AI comes in and takes the heavy lifting away and frees up hopefully the human to do the work that they're there to do, which is empathically connect with the guest.
That is such a powerful story. And I think in many health systems, we hear stories like that, but they're more the exception than the rule, right? And kind of dependent on that one person. You deeply study brands across all industries. When you think of healthcare, what are the risks in your mind of health systems and health system leaders in particular not kind of making this mind shift toward thinking differently about who a patient is? That maybe they are a guest, or there's more to that patient than the illness or why they're being seen.
I think there are some limitations that are industry specific. Ego is one of them. I was doing this speech recently, and an Indian doctor came up to me afterwards, and he took real issue with the idea of calling the patient anything other than a patient. And he had this power structure that he wanted to be very clear about, that the doctor is the king, and what the doctor says goes, and the patient will do what they're told. And really old school 1950s type kind of philosophy. And I was just fascinated to get inside his mind as to where this was coming from, because that's not the way the world works anymore. The world worked that way 60, 70 years ago. In the local village, the teacher, the priest, and the doctor were the king. And that's just not true anymore. They're just people. And the patient really sees that today as well. They're just people. And they feel like, when they go to see a clinician, that they want to be partnered with and cared for as opposed to worked on, And so I think there's definitely ego in this industry that isn't maybe present in other industries, and that is an issue that we need to address. The other one, I think, is worrying. I worry about attracting new talent to the industry. So people looking in see the exhaustion, see the overwhelm, and maybe we're not going to end up with the people that we should end up with, like an emotional, intelligent workforce. So why do people want to get into healthcare? Do people feel trapped in the industry? Do they want to leave? These are all big questions that we should ask ourselves about labour maintenance and the type of people that we want in terms of emotional intelligence. How do you develop that? And how do you give them the space? I know for a fact that unless you give people space in their career and space in their day, they don't enjoy their day. It's that simple. So when you overwork someone, they're never going to produce the kind of experiences that we want. And then the leadership have to value it. Yeah, we have to step away from being an asset-focused, clinically focused, procedurally focused, funding-focused industry. And we are all those things because we have to be, But the reality is when the focus is on those things, the focus then doesn't get put on the things that matter, which is the guest experience and how they feel. And again, going back to why we do what we do. We are in the life business. We're not in the hospital business. We're not in the surgery business. We're in the business of giving people long, healthy lives that they can use to fulfill their passions, spend with their loved ones. We're in the best business of all. And I think we're so disconnected from that on a day-to-day basis. The people in the hospitals doing admin, in management, are so disconnected from why we do what we do. We do it because we allow people live full retirement lives. We allow people to have amazing family lives, spend time with their loved ones, healthy and well. We're in the wellness business. We're in the joy business, ultimately. We're not in the healthcare business.
Yeah, Ken, you hit on something really important there, and I've heard you speak before about like creating a brand army, right? So like having the brand almost be its own living thing. And in healthcare, that's really, really important because of the staffing issues. As one of the major headwinds in the industry right now is attracting and keeping talent and drawing people to healthcare. So that being a big part of the brand army when these organizations are oftentimes employing tens of thousands of individuals. So how could a healthcare organization really leverage who they are as a brand to attract and retain talent so they can carry forward things like, the example you shared with the nurse in the magazine.
I think you have to stand for something. It's all about meaning and purpose. So in the book I've just brought out on Taylor Swift, she has one of the biggest tribal belongings of our time. That Swiftie army is a fascinating thing to study, just socially and culturally. So people belong to that army, beyond the music, beyond the videos. It's about belonging. It's about understanding that you're part of something bigger than you. And that's just human nature. And we seek that in sport, we seek it in shopping, we seek it in religion, we seek it in all sorts of things. It's just in us to belong. And so as a brand, if you formulate some kind of belonging where people feel this is who I am, then your job is done in terms of customer lifetime value. So we talk about this word customer lifetime value. We throw it around boardrooms all the time. But what it really means is like it's putting a ring on a customer's finger, like marriage, and it's saying, we're with you for life. And so in a weird way, brand loyalty-wise, most brands I work with expect the loyalty based on some kind of transaction equation. So it's like it's the 9 cups of coffee, get a 10th coffee free. Like, that's not loyalty. That's entrapment. That's like, does this hanky smell like chloroform to you? You're trying to kidnap a customer and trying to hold them down and force them to use your product again and again and again. Or, like broadband services or mobile phone carrier or cell carrier, 12-month, 24-month contract. They're trying to lock you in. God forbid you leave, because they haven't created a space that you want to stay. And in healthy relationships, that's what you do. You create a space that you want to stay in. We're all in relationships, be they family relationships, lovers, friends, that you choose to stay. And so that's what we need from our customers. But then what do we do? They come to us. They bring their business to us. They give us their money or their insurance money or whatever. But then what do we do in return to show them that we're loyal to them? Or not, obviously we give them the product, but that's just the ticket to play. Everyone does that. You give them the product. But beyond that, where's the relationship? And Taylor Swift understood that relationship is all around connection. And for 20 years, the reason that she's so successful today is because she's invested in that customer connection over 20 years. Beyond the music, she's invited them into her life. She stepped into their lives. She surprises and delights. She gamifies. She uses anticipation. She uses mischief and play. And she did all these other values around her: authenticity, intimacy, vulnerability. She has that play continuously because it's not just about the product. There's other people who are more talented than her. Lots of people have the same access to producers and directors as her. So why is her album the biggest album of all time? Why is her concert movie the big concert of all time? It's because she's invested in connection. Connection is everything. And so true of every single clinician, every single admin person, every single person in healthcare has an opportunity to connect. Back to your point though, that fishing magazine story, how do you do that every day? Mm-hmm. Well, you do, because if you don't do that every day, you haven't created any story that the guest or patient has to say and to tell. And if they're not telling your story, you're invisible as a brand. Mm-hmm. And so it is about going home every day and thinking, well, what fishing magazine story did I create today as a person? And interestingly, from an employee empowerment point of view, an employee satisfaction point of view, when we do that as humans, we feel good. Mm-hmm. Like we go home, we feel good because you've done something good. Right. It's a karmic payback. Yeah. And so sadly, in a busy 8-10 hour shift where you haven't done any of that, or 12-hour shift, you just go home exhausted. Mm-hmm. And you haven't you feel you haven't made a difference. Now clinically you've made a huge difference in those people's lives, but emotionally maybe you haven't connected. And if you're not connecting, you go home jaded. Yeah. And so it benefits everybody in a weird way. It benefits the guest who goes home with a smile, and it benefits the clinician who actually think, I stepped out of the bubble today and I made a difference in someone's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So interesting. And I have led experience work at 2 different health systems. So you're speaking my language, because mm-hmm. I have seen so many of that and heard so many stories from clinicians talking about how they really wanted to sit at the bedside. They really wanted to connect to the patient, but there was just so much to do. Mm. And a lot of the operational processes became barriers for them to be able to actually lean in to relationship building with patients. So I'd love to focus in on chapter 2 of Tailor Making. I have started to read the book. It's a wonderful read. I have learned so much already, and I can we should. Thank you. I can see why it would be important for healthcare leaders in particular to read the book and to learn from Taylor, who herself truly does lean into human understanding. Mm-hmm. She really understands how we're all wired and why that's important. Chapter 2 is about how she disrupted 2 large industries who have been somewhat infallible, or maybe felt they were infallible with their old business practices. And she came in and kind of said, no, I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to do something different. There's been a large conversation for many years, at least a decade, around how healthcare is ripe for disruption. I would love to hear your thoughts on that particular topic and what could health systems learn from Taylor Swift around how to kind of think about things differently and just design healthcare experiences in a way that truly are meaningful, that allow for that connection to occur?
I think everything is the way it is until it's not. And I think business models are very much like that. I think there's a laziness in the healthcare industry and the financial service industry, two particularly industries that have been left behind the curve in terms of direct to consumer and restructuring and realizing that the power has shifted from them to the consumer. Industries that acknowledge that the consumer now has all the power have responded quite well and have. The other thing I suppose to say is that disruption tends to come from outside the industry mostly. And so it'll be players that you don't expect. It'll be the Amazons of this world cherry picking. They will always cherry pick the most profitable elements. And sadly, if you're not fast enough on the disruption scale yourself, you'll be left with the least profitable parts of healthcare. And all the profitable parts will be taken by someone else, new players. Taylor Swift looked at, the music industry, the publishing industry, the entertainment industry, the movie industry, she's challenged all the distribution channels. And the distribution channels are always fascinating because it's just, there's layers and layers involved. And eventually someone takes the power and thinks, well, why are all these layers involved? Like her movie is a good example. So when she released her movie, usually a big studio produced a movie, a distributor distributes the movie. And so there's four kind of hands in the pie. There's the studio who made the movie, the distributor who distributes the movie, there's the cinema who shows the movie, and finally there's the person like Taylor who would own the movie. And so each person gets a very small share then. Whereas Taylor thought, well, I don't need a production house to make my movie. I don't need a big studio. I'll just hire, a few people that I like. And she directed her own movie, produced her own movie, and then didn't use a distributor. Went directly to the cinemas and said, okay, let's fill 12 screens. And the cinemas, of course, knew it was going to be the biggest demand movie of the year. It took more revenue on its opening night than any other movie ever in the world. Bigger than Star Wars, bigger than Harry Potter. So they knew what was coming. So why would she give distributors money? Why would she give studio money? And she did the same for publishing a book, only published directly. It was in Target briefly, but it was only available direct to consumer from her website. Why would she give a publisher all that money? And it's not about the money, because let's face it, she doesn't need any more money. It's about the control. It's about, I can control the narrative here better. And I don't mean manipulative control. I mean, it's my brand and I want to be close to my customer. And the more people in between me and them. And she was really, really genuinely upset at the Ticketmaster debacle in terms of the tickets. And I'm not going to be surprised if in the future she goes around them and just goes direct and builds her own ticketing system. And so in healthcare, I think we need to look at all the layers, all the processes, all the way we do things, the speed, which is not necessarily very customer friendly, the transparency, the customer intimacy that's missing, and have a real look at that. Because unless we're the one click, one swipe world that every other consumer is living in today, where you get what you want immediately, people don't wait for anything. There's a whole generation behind us who don't understand that white buffering wheel. Like we all grew up with the white buffering wheel on the screen, and what we learned was, it'll be okay in a moment, just give it time. But Gen Z and Gen Alpha don't do that. They think, what the hell is that? My kids are 19 and 18. If that wheel ever appeared on the screen, they're gone. If they're on Netflix and it hangs for 2 seconds, they're on to Disney Plus immediately.
True.
There's no tolerance. And so we have a whole generation of Veruca Salts coming up. I want it now, Daddy. They just want what they want, and they want it now. And healthcare isn't operating that way.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge challenge for us, and also true of the same of the employee. The employee wants to make an impact immediately when they come in, and if that's not being allowed them, they're gone.
Yeah.
They will leave.
And just in the last 5 years, the oldest of the Gen Zs are now in the workforce and becoming healthcare consumers themselves.
Yes.
I have a 23-year-old and a 27-year-old, and same experience. I know what they'll tolerate and what they won't. And for that reason, I think healthcare is going to be forced to transform in many ways as these new consumers come in and start to change us. Maybe they're the true disruptor.
Look, and when disruption is forced on us, it's never a good thing. So the pandemic is a really good example of that, when the whole healthcare had to go kind of understand first. We should have been way ahead of that curve. Like the idea that you had to go to see a GP for something very simple as maybe a prescription refill or whatever, and now you just do it virtually. That makes sense. Yeah. But there were so many industries that, and healthcare isn't the only one, that were forced suddenly into the reality of, there's different ways of doing things. And those distribution models were forced on us because of the freedoms that were taken away, but it shouldn't have taken a pandemic for us to realize that the system was broken and that we needed to become more guest-centered as opposed to process-centered. And sometimes I still meet usually cosmetic surgeons and that kind of business who boast about their 1-year waiting list. And I always say, that's not a good thing. Like a 1-year waiting list is the opposite. Maybe that was good in the 80s. But today you're either losing business or else you're kind of creating ego in your industry, which is not something that the customers actually respect anymore.
Right.
True.
Right. Well, we could certainly talk for hours about
Yes.
this. This is
Let's talk for hours.
this
do
is
a
right in our
4-hour
wheelhouse
podcast.
here, but we cannot. So actually, I think what we'd like to do is we like to close on a segment called Executive Round, and where we ask all of our guests effectively the same question and get your unique perspective on it from your view, and that is around the known and felt paradigm shift that's happening in healthcare today, and it is some of the transformational and disruptive forces that you've referenced today during our conversation. The question to you is, what ways have you seen healthcare transformation occur to date, and then what do you hope to see in the coming years?
Okay. I'll just tell you one story. I won't mention his name in case he doesn't like the story being told. I think he tells it publicly, but just in case. A CEO of a major hospital in the States. And every time he visits the hospital, he takes his jacket off and he puts on a plastic apron from the dining area, and he goes around and he delivers meals to the beds. For two reasons. One is he realizes that patients will tell the dining staff everything. It's a bit like going to your hairdresser. You tell them everything. You don't tell the clinicians something in case it has an impact on you as a patient, but you tell the dining staff everything. And he's learned that. So he gets all sorts of great feedback literally from the shop floor doing it. But the main reason he does it is because he wants his staff, who are all, as we said, overworked, to see that even as CEO, he can take 5 and 10 minutes out of his day to talk to patients as people, not as product. And he knows that that comes from the top. It's all about leadership. And so the leaders listening to this today need to understand that it lies at their feet solely to empower their employees to deliver magnificent guest experiences. And you have to be showcasing it from the top. You have to show it from the top that you are building a customer-centric organization, that's the philosophy that pervades the business. Mm-hmm. And people have to see that as leaders. And if we don't see it from our leaders and we're asked to do it in an already busy day, it just doesn't happen. Right. So for me, it's all about employee empowerment from the leadership team.
Love it. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us again, Ken. Congratulations and good luck with the book and the rest of your tour.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.